All right, Entree Architect community, it's 7 minutes after 4, which means it's past time for the Entree Architect Context and Clarity conversation for Friday, March 25th, 2022. Thanks for joining us. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where you're joining from, both geographically and the platform that you're joining from, because we're simulcast as we do every Thursday afternoon for Context and Clarity Live. We're simulcasting these book club conversations out to all the places all over the internet. Honestly, we're just trying to break the internet, see if that's possible. So let us know that you're here and let us know where you're joining the conversation from. If we've never met before, my name's Jeff. I am either in the construct of the Matrix or Indianapolis. You get to choose. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. Doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Everything that we discuss, one topic every day, they're all the need to know topics for the success of small firm architects just like you. Beginning in 2022, we launched this new thing called the Context and Clarity Book Club. Welcome to the March discussion as Catherine has dropped down to the bottom of the screen there. Today we are discussing Dare to Lead by Breneé Brown. So let's see who read Dare to Lead. That's what we'll talk about today. Obviously, this looks a little bit different than a Tuesday afternoon, for instance, because I'm joined today by my often co-host, Catherine McPhail. Hi, Catherine.
Hello. Often, I feel like I'm always your co-host.
Well,
When you
you
have
are,
one,
yeah.
when you have one, I'm
When I have a
almost always.
co-host, you are my co-host.
Oh,
Yes.
good. Okay. Phew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought
I
maybe
don't
you had
know
to tell
how
me
else.
something.
Did you get an invite today, or did you just show
I
up?
actually, you know what? I didn't. I just know how to
Yeah,
get here, so that's how I got here.
just showed up.
You didn't
That's
even
well,
send me
good.
a link, to be
Yeah,
honest about it. But
welcome. Glad you're here.
thank you. Thank
We're
you.
also we're also joined in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, another Entree Architect community member, Caitlin Scott. Hi, Caitlin.
Oh, hi there. Do you want to know anything about me or anything like
Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself?
that? All right. Caitlin Scott. I live and work in Houston. I worked mainly in commercial for the last several years, but as of about a little more than a year ago, I went out on my own. I'm still in the process of also finishing my license. So what I largely do is consult for other architects and that kind of stuff. Or do the small things that Texas will allow me to do without a license. But yeah, so Entree Architect has been very helpful for me as I figure out how to put contracts together and do all the things that don't necessarily teach you when you're working in the office, and also focusing on that pro practice portion of the licensing exams. So
Very
yeah.
good. Yeah, very good. And I invited Caitlin to join us today because I think you may have been when I first announced, or the post first went up, announcing our March book, Dare to Lead. Caitlin jumped in right away and said, "What a great book!" And I think you might have been the first. So we had to get Caitlin on the screen for the conversation today. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Below Caitlin is Jay Caroli. Jay, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Jay Caroli from Northern Vermont, artist, activist, architect.
AAA.
And I like it when our guests come in and they give us some hint as to whether or not they've read the book. So some have just come right out and said, I didn't read it. Some have let us know in some vulnerable way that they have read it. And I like that.
Okay. Well, I'd like to comment on that. We just assume anybody who comes on the screen has actually read the book. You do not need to have read the book to be in the comments, but to be here, you're supposed to have read the book. We're going to be discussing it. So
Christian was the first one here, and he said, I have not read the book.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh,
I'm talking about the people
on
the screen. On the screen.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I should be quiet.
Yeah, I don't mean other people. We don't care if they read the book or didn't read the book.
But we want them to be part of the discussion. Yeah,
Absolutely, yes, we do.
if you show up in the comments section over on the right hand side of the screen, you're welcome whether you've read the book or not. And one thing I do need to say before we go any further is if you are commenting right now and your comment is not showing up on the right hand side of the screen as you see us, it's probably because you're in a private Facebook group. So either the Entree Architect Community Facebook group or the Entree Architects and Allies group, and you need to give Facebook permission to communicate with Restream, which is this platform that we use right now. So there's a URL down at the bottom left of your screen right now, chat.restream.io/FB, like Facebook. And if you take that and put that into your browser window, go to that URL again, chat.restream.io/FB. A couple of clicks later, you'll give Facebook permission and you'll start showing up. Your comments will start showing up on the right-hand side of the screen right there. So I should put that back there. And below Jay Caroli, I see Michelle Slinger. Hi, Michelle. Can you hear us? I'm not sure Michelle can hear us.
Oh, we just have her there for fun. Just
well, so obviously we got started a little bit late. We're still working through some logistical challenges here. Oh,
Hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's hard to understand you. Can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Lovely. I can hear you.
So,
Hello,
Michelle,
I
can
am
you
Michelle
introduce yourself?
From Grenada, the lovely island of Grenada. Pardon me, I'm outside in my patio, looking at my knee from work and enjoying. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
we can hear you, but there's about a 2-minute delay.
Okay. Hello, Michelle Slinger, architect in private practice from the island of Breneé, and have been an active participant.
Yes.
Of entry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Been an active member for over, I think, 6 now. I'm really keen to a particular discussion as I look at membership growth in leadership. Forward to this.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Michelle. And Michelle was another that was very early after we announced the book that she has commented several times on how powerful she thinks it is. So it's great to have you join us today, Michelle. And looking over to the comment section from everybody that's out there from all the places on the internet, I see Christian on my screen first. And we have a tradition here on Context and Clarity that the first person in the room wins an award. And that award for being the first in is the John Kinney Memorial Crocheted Bathtub Award. So Christian is the winner of today's Crocheted Bathtub. He says he's just here for the bathtub. He hasn't read the book. That's all right. You can still participate in this conversation. Vulnerable John Jones is below him. Welcome back, John. Yoko, welcome back. She says she's driving in Maryland. Careful driving and contexting, Yoko. Ed Shannon, welcome back from Des Moines. Glad you're here. And Manuel is here from New York City. He says he read the book. That's good. That's very good. John says it looks cold where Jay is. And it does look cold where Jay
46
is.
degrees in here.
Inside or outside?
Inside.
Inside.
I think it's warmer outside.
Okay. Hopefully it's warmer where Michelle is. That's all I have to say. She's sitting out on her patio. Wendy, welcome back from Western Massachusetts. Mark LePage from Waxhaw, North Carolina. He says he's daring greatly. Manuel says he still has three pages to finish, so he feels vulnerable, but now he knows how to rumble with his vulnerability. All right, we're getting lots of hints being dropped here about this book. Alan, welcome back from Southern Vermont. Lots of people joining us on the Facebook side. I don't see too many from LinkedIn or otherwise yet, so we'll see who all shows up. Nicole is throwing us a curveball. She's on vacation. She's not in Arizona today. She's in Savannah, Georgia. Unfortunately, I don't think the Bananas are in Savannah today.
Are you now following their schedule?
I've kind of been watching. Yeah, I think
like a super fan now.
They're on their road tour. Instagram is a wonderful thing,
isn't it? Though.
And producing some good TikToks. Yeah.
Yeah. Both on both of those. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Glad that you're here. Mark says he's put his armor in the closet for the call. That's good. That's very good. Nice reference to Dare to Lead. And for everybody else that's out there, welcome to the Context and Clarity Book Club. We do this once a month. The last Friday of every month, we discuss a new book. And at the end of this conversation, we'll announce the book for April, for next month. So you'll actually get...
I don't want to wait, though. I want it now. I want to know now.
I want to know now, too.
Yeah, see, this is part of my game. It's forcing you.
All right. I usually get to set the rules. Okay, fine. I'll wait.
You'll know soon enough.
Could just mute ourselves until you tell us.
No, it's all right. We'll wait till the end. I'll give Jeff this one.
You could do that. Yeah. But because of the way the months work out, you get nearly 5 weeks to read next month's book. So just
good.
Throwing that out there. So wait till the end, and we will announce the April Context and Clarity.
Funny
book
thing is,
club
I think
book.
I know what it is, but I have no memory of it. So anyway,
we discussed it in our team meeting on Tuesday.
I know that was 3 days ago.
just say it.
I know. Should have written it down.
Right. That's all right. Hey, Isra's joining us from YouTube and also Boston. YouTube in Boston. All right. Dare to Lead. When we announced this book, we got lots and lots of people going, "Oh, I'm glad that you picked this book." I also think it's a great follow-up to some of the conversations that we've had lately, especially a few weeks ago on Context and Clarity Live. There's some really, I believe, really important lessons to learn in Dare to Lead. But anybody want to kick this off? What's your biggest takeaway, maybe, from Dare to Lead? Either your biggest takeaway or maybe the biggest surprise. You can start from either direction. Biggest takeaway or biggest surprise from Dare to Lead. Anybody want to start?
I have a question.
Okay, what's your question?
I might have missed this at the beginning, but rumble, how does she define rumbling? Rumbling. Does that just mean like getting together and talking about stuff? Is that what it means? I mean, I assume that's what it means, but did she talk about rumbling and I wasn't listening at that point?
She talked a lot about rumbling, yes.
Yes, she mentioned rumbling a lot, but was there a chapter on this is what rumbling means?
I think she... Sorry, Michelle?
Towards the end of the book, he describes rumbling. And basically, towards the end of the book, there is a discourse on rumbling. And basically, the way that she describes rumbling is basically like having a wrestling match with all of the idea that you're dealing with, that you're wrestling with in a group meeting. It could be in an individual session as well, but in a group meeting, everything out, putting it on the table, having a discussion about it, examining it. And she goes on basically just to espouse the idea that if you get a point in the rumble where it's too difficult, so stop, to walk away, pivot and come back. So if you I'm structured wrestling, not the wide wrestling kind of a man, and examining ideas of his view. That is how I interpret our concept of rumbling.
Yeah, she did have a list maybe of ground rules, or at least they came out. And you know, one of the things that Michelle was just talking about was that everybody has the permission maybe to call timeout, and everybody
Well,
walks away and takes time to consider, you know, like Michelle said, when if it gets too difficult.
okay. Well,
Caitlin.
I definitely missed that part.
I think also it's implied kind of throughout the book that rumbling is coming to the conversation very authentically and with the intention to address concerns as a team, as opposed to coming with the perspective that you're defending your point of view at any cost, or that you need to protect yourself by not being fully honest in the conversation. I think a lot of what she talks about is trying to avoid things like back channeling by being open and honest and vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
I love what Manuel was just saying, because so often, you know, we come to the business place and we're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're not supposed to show emotion. We're not supposed to be fallible. But she breaks that all open and says, no, you're going to be more successful if you can come to grips with your core values and your vulnerability. And that was a great takeaway for me.
Yeah, I'm going to put Manuel's comment up there on the screen real quick. He says, my daughter, who is teaching at a private all-girls school in Manhattan, said that this book is read by all the teachers and administrators in the school, and it quotes almost daily as she rolls her eyes in disbelief as he was reading it. He guesses that she doesn't see him as a feely person, and this book deals with how to get in touch with your feelings to the nth degree.
Well, that would be the perfect person to read it, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're not a feely person.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the places that some may feel challenged by this book. Certainly, some of you have actually seen this presentation that I do called Ego versus Empathy, and there's a whole section in the book about empathy. And I was driving back from Goshen, Indiana. About a 2-hour and 40-minute drive, listening to the book, and a big portion of that drive was the section where she's talking about empathy. And I'm not sure how much progress I made, because she would say something, you know, she'd talk for a while, and then I'd hit rewind and listen to it over and over. And I just thought, because I've got to talk on it. I think it's incredibly important that we understand empathy, how to become empathetic, and all of these things. And that to me was just gold. So if I look back at Audible, the little clips or the bookmark feature on there, I'm pretty sure I have 170 bookmarks in about a 17-minute stretch in that part of the book.
I always forget to do that.
On Audible?
Do you ever go back and look at it, though, the bookmarks?
I do, because I use them when we're researching people.
Yeah.
But
because I'm driving, it would be great to be able to bookmark something and come back to it, because I always want to. There was a lot in this book that I wanted to come back to, and so I was stopping and dictating to my phone some of the things that I wanted to remember. And I don't do that with every book.
No. And I will say too, there are a lot of resources on Breneé Brown's website, which is just breneébrown.com, I believe, that are related to all of her books, but there are resources that are related specifically to Dare to Lead. There's downloadables and all kinds of things. The what is the values guide, the list of values?
I downloaded that, Jeff, and I
Did you?
printed it for myself and for my wife. And we are both going to pick our own 2 values, and we're going to pick what we think the other one is going to pick as their 2 values, and seem like a maybe that should be in my marriage counseling group, not my Entree Architect group.
Yeah, wrong group, Jay.
But wrong group.
Sounds like a game show.
A lot of what she talked about was, this is a business book, but it's a self-help book in a lot of ways too, because I can bring this to all my relationships, is the vulnerability and my core values. And I should bring them to all of my relationships, not just business relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm actually going through the process of having a friend come and join me and working together, becoming partners. And so we're going through the process of I have a whole stack of values cards here put together. We're going through, laying them out, talking about what our values are, and kind of talking about how we prioritize things. So they're on the same page from the beginning, in what our values are for the company, but also our lives. What do I want our lives to look like in the big picture, besides just working together? So yeah, I think it's very helpful to be able to have that kind of conversation with somebody, especially if you're working together, but in all relationships.
But, and I think that gets right to the heart of the book, right? I mean, there's so many of us, and having gone through several startup situations where we didn't do what you're talking about, right? No one was vulnerable enough to talk about what their values were, any of that. And I think that's a great way to start it out. I applaud you for that.
Thanks. Yeah, I love, I read this book about a year ago. I re-listened at least a good chunk of it before today, just because I wanted to be fresh with it. But I listened to this about a year ago really a couple months before I went out on my own. And along with Breneé Brown, there are a few other women who in particular I listened to. There's another leadership book that came out at the same time by Stacey Abrams that I was reading kind of in tandem with it. And a lot of the conversations in both of these books are about the kind of, there's actually, I think it's not from the book, but Breneé, I saw a talk of hers where she was talking about how they did research into the people who are the most compassionate, like monks and people who have demonstrated in their life a lot of compassion. And the thing that they had in common was a strong sense of their own boundaries and an ability to hold them. And I thought that was a very important thing to think about, because it's really about if a person is able to practice the level of self-compassion that it takes to know what kind of boundaries they need to set in their relationships, that means that they have the capability to give that compassion to others, but you have to do it for yourself first. And that's one of the things I really like about how Breneé approaches things like leadership. Because I think a lot of times you can see leaders in firms in particular, getting into a place of martyrdom or stretching themselves and their time so thin and kind of reveling in working so much. It's not a very self-compassionate way to practice. And it reflects, I think, in the way they end up treating their staff and the people that work with them.
Yeah, I think that's another excellent observation, because it's, as much as it's about interpersonal relationships, I think there's also your relationship with yourself. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to put Jake's comment up on the screen and see what everybody thinks about this. Jake says the surprising thing is that what Breneé talks about is fairly intuitive, but extremely difficult to implement. Agree or disagree on, there's, I guess, 2 points there.
I guess I agree and disagree to the 2
Okay.
points. I agree to the first one, and I don't really agree that it's that difficult to implement. I mean, it's hard to remember to implement everything at one time, but it doesn't seem that unattainable.
You know what I
believe
want to go
Okay.
back and listen to more.
fundamentally,
I think when it comes to being vulnerable, I think it really depends on like the individual. I think a lot of us are conditioned to have that armor on, right? Um, and that's because like oftentimes it's the kind of
I
thing where
would
the things that
agree
help you survive
as
don't
well.
necessarily help you thrive.
Purely
I'm
because,
sorry,
well,
the lag's getting us. But sorry, what was I saying? And so it kind of depends on where you are. How long have you had to have that armor on? How self-aware are you of your own armor? You know, like putting your defenses up is something that we learn to keep ourselves safe. But it's not the thing that helps us grow. It's hard for us to, because you have to take risks to grow. You have to be vulnerable to grow. You have to admit that you don't know the answer and not be the knower, you know? You have to be curious, and that can be difficult for people, especially if they've been punished or hurt because they took those kind of risks. So I think the intuitiveness, I think a lot of us want to be able to have these kind of relationships, but being able to build them in our lives can take a lot of work.
So the part that was difficult for me that I want to go back and listen to is or kind of those boundaries around vulnerability, because I may find myself oversharing sometimes, and I don't think, you know, and she makes some good points about that being, you know, you don't want to. I don't remember what she says. I remember that I want to go back and listen to it because I want to be conscious of it.
I remember this part about disclosure, how disclosure and vulnerability aren't the same thing. You can over disclose but not be vulnerable, and you can also be very vulnerable without necessarily disclosing very much. And I think it's a very good point, because I've definitely been in situations where leadership is disclosing more than is appropriate for me as someone in a position like under them in power structure to know about their personal life, but they're not vulnerable to me anyway. And in fact, I think that they feel comfortable disclosing more than they should to you in those situations because you don't have power in the relationship. And so it's actually ends up being kind of a toxic, sort of exploitative situation if you're not, as a leader, careful about the way that over sharing can affect the people underneath you. It's the kind of thing that, like, when even, and it can be stuff about your personal life, but it can also be things like the company is in financial trouble. How do you handle that kind of disclosure with your employees? Like staying honest with them in a way that allows them like their autonomy, but also doesn't put the burden of like them trying to solve that problem for you, kind of thing.
Get a good memory of the book.
Like I said, I was listening to it like the last couple of days to catch up.
Yeah, well, me too, but I don't remember that part.
The I think this was in the disclosure part where, you know, my interpretation was sort of, there are people that will disclose strategically, right, as a way to, you know, you were talking about how, Caitlin, you were talking about how a principal may, you know, overwork themselves, and then essentially they leverage that to some end, and you know, that's not being vulnerable. Obviously, that's a strategic, almost like a driving a wedge, and it's a weapon. I guess maybe weaponizing it. I don't know that she says it that way, but
Yeah, but to listen to the way that Caitlin just explained it, it sounds to me like if I'm doing that I could be guilty of being a bully. But,
well, can we have examples? I'd like examples because I'm thinking the same thing as Jay.
Well, I think it's true, but yeah, but
well, like for instance, like a real life experience without using anybody's names, but I had like a manager once who, we'd get in the car to drive to a site, and then he'd be talking about like the issues in his marriage. And I'm like a a woman in her early 20s sitting with a man in his 50s talking about his marriage, and I can't really say like, I could have said, this makes me uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm the appropriate person for you to have this conversation with. But when you're just starting out, this is your direct manager. I think it's that he felt he could talk to me about these kind of things because I wasn't in a position to refuse talking about it with him. And so it's the kind of thing where then from my perspective, I'm navigating, where is this coming from? Why am I being told this kind of stuff? And he's not being a very responsible leader in that relationship. And so, and we're human beings. We want to it can be difficult to know what is making friends, what is establishing trust and intimacy with the people that you work with in a positive way, and what is something that affects the people who work for you in a way, because they can't share that kind of stuff with you and necessarily be safe, I think it's being self-aware about the way the power dynamics in your relationships work in the office.
And then trust was a big chapter or a big portion of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was really fascinated by when she was talking about the difference between embarrassment, shame, and humiliation, and that a lot of people use those words interchangeably. But then shame is something you feel shame if you feel like you deserve whatever the person said, and you feel humiliation if you don't like own that feeling, or if you feel like that doesn't have anything to do with me, but that was humiliating. So I thought that was an interesting. And then embarrassment is something you could possibly laugh about later. So very different things. That's interesting.
I will say that I think I learned some definitions of words that I already thought that I knew. I thought I knew what the definition was, but I learned. That example is a great one. Well, that's what the difference is between these few.
Yeah.
Manuel. This is why. This is one of the reasons I love Manuel. He says, I thought it uncanny how the idea of empathy. Go ahead, Michelle.
It's going to take a couple minutes.
Yeah, it's all right.
Wait. Okay. And what I find things, as you say, is the rediscovered definitions. The fact that it turned to other material without a raw object. To date, I believe she's covered something 30,000 people working in her research leading up to the book and out of the book.
That was one thing that surprised me when I looked Breneé Brown up on LinkedIn. I don't know what I expected her headline to be, but she's listed as a researcher, which makes sense. I mean, that's the core of what she does, and then that research is then translated is then shared via the books and the talks and the consulting that she does. But I did really appreciate that about the book, that this is not anecdotal, even though, although I will say that, and sometimes we talk about this, I've listened to the book as I listen to all books that I consume. I absolutely loved the audio recording of it, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the book, but Breneé narrates the book, and I felt like she was sitting in the room with me, just talking about the book, about talking about her research and telling the story. So I think it is a fantastic audio recording for whatever that's worth. But I did also really appreciate the fact that it's very research based. I mean, it's not anecdotal things that she's noticed over the course of her life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is all really well grounded in science.
Yeah, she's a researcher at U of H here in Houston, so like H-Town girls. It's great. And, I really enjoy the audiobook version too. That's also how I pretty much consume everything these days. But like you said, like she reads it herself, which I really appreciate. I like the moments where she's like, let me pause and read what I just read to you again, as a way to emphasize things. I also I feel like I relate to her way. What I really enjoyed about the book, like in my initial takeaways when I read it like a year ago, is just this person understands leadership the way that I understand leadership, and the way I feel about it, and in a way that I haven't seen reflected in the environments of leadership. And so it was like very validating to see someone talk about like the things that you find intuitive are good forms of leadership, especially when it can be invalidating to be environments where you're like, I'm not experiencing it though. And to be frustrated, like, oh, I just wish that people would lead from these perspectives. I wish they would trust us to be on their team instead of trying to control us. I think that's a big takeaway too from the book, is just that as a leader, your goal isn't to necessarily control the people you're leading, but to inspire them to be on a team with you and to give them the motivation to reach the same goals altogether.
Yeah, I think I'm going to preface this by saying this is not a political statement, the one I'm about to make. I think by and large there's a leadership vacuum when we really think about and talk about what true leadership is. I think at just about every level that we can look at, that we've got a leadership problem. And would having everybody read Breneé Brown's Dare to Lead solve the problem? I don't know how many people in our community actually read the book over the course of the past month. But I think if we instituted what or implemented what she talks about, I'm 100% with you. I mean, this is true leadership. This is actually, and it reminds me that maybe we should look at some of Simon Sinek's books, because he talks about, in several of them, he looks at what real leadership is. Not managing, not demanding, not, whatever forms that many of us have seen, again, in corporate, political, family, liturgical, whatever. I think, again, if you lead on any level, there's a lot to learn from this book and implement from this book, I believe. And I'll step off of my soapbox for a minute.
Well, now I'm afraid to say anything, because honestly, I don't know if I'm going to be disclosing anything or being vulnerable. So,
well, why do you feel that way, Catherine? Why do you say that?
Well, because I know this is the first time you met me, Caitlin, but I seem to be an oversharer as well, public oversharer, and so, yeah. So now I'm afraid to overshare, as Jay would say, or to disclose in a weaponized way or something, or just be. Anyway, so here's what I was going to say. So I was listening to the book, and it reminded me a lot of like 12-step programs, which I've been in. That's a disclosure / vulnerability, and then it came that she was in them. So I was right. But anyway, besides being right, I mean, that's, I think maybe why it doesn't bother me that much, because it's not like new information to me. And it's just like what I've been trying to do for years, so like 15 years or 14 years or something.
I'm also a person who shares personal information without really feeling like it's a big deal. I think there's a big difference between disclosure that's that's manipulative, and just being very honest about the things that you experience, like things like being in AA, dealing with addiction, dealing with mental health stuff. Like, I think there's a lot actually of value in being honest about those kind of things.
Yeah, but I do too, because you can help people, right, who need help. So,
and it's like those are things that we like have a culture of shame around. That by speaking about, we kind of help to dismantle that shame. Which shame is the thing that, like, I think she talks about this too, the way that shame is really the driver of addiction a lot of times, the thing that underlies that. Yep. So, I don't want to leave off on like that, to be honest about things that are taboo necessarily, or that we have like a culture of shame around, is the same thing as like disclosing. Like kind of what she's saying, there's a difference between disclosure and vulnerability, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but it's all about kind of the intent, like the why. And I think that, like when you're sharing, like I wouldn't want you to be afraid of that. I think you can intuit when you're being honest for like the reasons of connection, or like there's a lot of good ways to share. I guess I'm just like, I don't want to discourage people from sharing things.
Well, it won't last long if I'm discouraged anyway. I'll forget about it in a couple of days. But but yeah, it's I mean, that example you gave of your manager in the car with you talking about his marriage, that is completely not appropriate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recognize that as not. John also overshares. Well, see, this is why we can all be friends, John. And if Jay overshares, that's why I like you, Jay.
I do. Yep.
Who doesn't overshare is Jeff Eccles. Does not overshare. I mean, not to call you out, but
I just read comments.
Yeah.
Right. They're overshare for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Together, that's all.
There was an example. I think this was one of the disclosure examples in the book, where it was a startup founder, I think, that was going in front of VCs, going in front of people that basically pitching for funding and saying, listen, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. We're failing, this kind of story. And he felt like he was being vulnerable. And I suppose he's being vulnerable.
He was, but didn't get him very far.
But she I think this is a conversation after a talk that she did, and she kind of pulled him aside and said, listen, there's being vulnerable, but then there's also what are the repercussions? That's not the right way to say it, but how does this affect the people that you're being vulnerable with, right? Is it going to cause the employees to panic and go, what do you mean you don't know what you're doing and we're failing? We're out of here. And does it cause someone that either may have invested or that may have invested to go, wait a minute, what are you doing with my money? Or someone that you're asking to invest to go, not a chance, right? You're telling me that you don't have a clue what's going on. So that was one of the examples in the book, and that was not the appropriate way to be vulnerable, I guess. I don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's kind of like when your kids, like, you want to tell your kids the truth, right? But then you don't want them to freak out. So if you think something is going to happen here and we're just going to stay calm, even though you might personally be freaking out, but because you're the leader of the family, you need to not really disclose the way you're really feeling. So similar to that, I think.
Well, and I liked her point in that story where she asked him, like, what are you trying to accomplish by telling everyone that you don't know what you're doing?
Exactly.
And he said, I just want them to know that I'm trying and I'm messing up and I'm scared that they won't like me. And she made a good point too, like when she asked a room of people, like, would you want this guy to do this in this situation? And mostly it was people who were in that industry saying, I would want him to at least be saying it to someone though. Like there needs to be a mentor in his life that he says, I'm like he needs to be saying somebody, I'm out of my depth. But the right thing isn't to just announce that to all his investors so that they won't be mad at him if he messes up. Because that in a way was a way of putting on armor to protect him from their judgment, as opposed to like dealing with his insecurity in the moment and what was not working for him. So I appreciate the way she doesn't just tell him like, don't say that to people, keep that to yourself, that there's an appropriate person, there's an appropriate outlet for those feelings. It's not all of your investors.
Yeah. Or employees or others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. There was a comment that I was going to pop up a minute ago. Let's see if I can find it. Manuel said, here it is. This is going back to the empathy piece. He said, I thought it uncanny how the idea of empathy, which came across with Chris Voss. So that was the book that we read last month. I think that was last month. Never Split the Difference. What he talks about is expanded on by Breneé Brown, and probably not directly, but you can see the connection there. He says, I also see how she expands on the idea of accountability that I first came across in Gary Vaynerchuk's 12 and a half. And she even got into his half virtue, which is candor. And so many of you know I love those connections, right? We read these different books, find these different sources, and wow, here's these intersections between all of these. Thank you for that, Manuel. We may read 12 and a half this year because that's a, believe it or not, many people, if you know the name Gary Vaynerchuk, he's talked about empathy for several years now, a lot, but you may not expect a book on emotional intelligence to come necessarily from Gary Vaynerchuk, but that is exactly what 12 and a half is. It's a book on emotional intelligence. And I guess there's a lot of Dare to Lead that's really about emotional intelligence as well. I just saw something about a ham fold over. I'm not sure. Not sure what that comment was about.
When she gets mad about her husband saying there's never any ham, or we don't even have any ham in here. And so she took it as being like, that's because she's a bad wife and she hasn't gone shopping, blah, blah, blah. So she kind of overreacts. But her very evolved husband, broke it down for her. So that was a nice story.
Yeah, I appreciate the.
This is very critical what you're addressing there, Catherine, because it's one of the big components for me in that what she was addressing there, the narrative in your head, what the stories that you are telling yourself, which may coincide the reality of what is happening. But you're reacting to your narratives as opposed to stepping back at the information that is available. And as human beings, the first person that speaks to us is a narrative in our heads. Once we recognize that that narrative is always there, is accurate, we can modulate and therefore then impact our risk.
Yeah, that was the point of that ham fold over story, and that's a great analysis of it. That it's the stories in our head. We all do it. We all make up our own little scenario of what's going on and why that person said that, and it has nothing to do with reality. That's great.
Yeah. I do want to know what a ham fold over is, though. Is it like cheese in between ham? You just like take the ham, fold it over stuff like mustard and mayonnaise and some cheese. So
whatever you want it to be, Catherine.
Yeah. Okay.
I like the part in the book too. I appreciate how often she uses her own, like, the things that she struggles with to make a point of, like, to make her point. I really like the part where she talks about the people who worked with her on her team telling her that she's not good at time management and that the time goals that she's setting are not sustainable for them. And, basically how, like, her instinct, because she feels, and I also have the same kind of thing where it's like, that's the thing I know I struggle with. And so I feel insecure about it. And I could feel defensive if someone calls me out on that because I want to do this right. I want to be the right kind of leader who doesn't put people in bad situations. But she has to really listen to them because they're telling her, like, you make us feel like a dream killer when we can't meet these goals that you've set that we didn't get to input into. And having, like, a very honest team, and I think that says a lot about, like, the kind of environment she's created for the people who work with her, who they can feel safe enough to say, like, the things that you do have an impact on us, and that she's able to, like, actually listen to them. And I think it's just a very good example of how, like, even when you are a person who's very open and emotionally intelligent the way Breneé Brown is, you're still going to come up on things that you feel insecure and sensitive about. And you're going to have to look at yourself again and ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? And sometimes it'd be painful and embarrassing.
I think maybe above anything else, it's such a human discussion, which is the point. But as you were saying that, Caitlin, I was recalling that story in my mind and thinking that sounds like a really great place to work. It sounds like a really great workplace, which is the point. I mean, how do you build these, or whatever you do, how do you evolve these workplaces where you can share and everybody can what did she call it was oh, I forget what it was now, but what's it going to take to get this done? Basically, what is success? Painting? Is
What
it
it looks
painting
like.
success?
What
What
that
is
looks like, yeah,
Yeah,
And
those stories I thought were amazing as well.
yeah, what does done look like? That makes so much of a difference because it's very open ended otherwise. And how many times have I been disappointed when someone didn't do something the way I thought they would, but I didn't exactly say what it would look like at the end. So that's a very important point.
And I like how it goes from, like, kind of you telling someone what to do and then they try to accomplish it without a conversation, to that person following up with, can you paint done for me, where you explain what done is. But from there she goes into, but really the most effective thing is having a conversation between the two people about what needs to get accomplished so that there's feedback from both sides. So it's not just a directive from someone saying, I'm delegating this to you, do it, here's how you do it, but also, like, giving them the space to input what done looks like too, so that you can see the things that might come up that you have a blind spot for, and it's much more collaborative.
Yeah, and also I don't remember if it was, I think it was talking about success, but basically, what are we actually trying to accomplish? I mean, we have conversations all the time about, okay, this, and this, and maybe this is what done looks like. Maybe that's this part of that, but okay, we can do this, and this, and this, but is that actually going to accomplish the result that we're looking for, or is it just checking the boxes? That's you use the word collaborative, and I think that's another big takeaway. It's all of this is 100% about collaboration.
Yeah, here in Houston, I've been a part of the Women in Architecture Committee at our local AIA for a long time, and last year I was the chair. But a big part of what I've been doing there was programming our annual equity series, which is like a panel discussion workshop. And we did a subject a couple of years ago called Me to We, which was kind of discussing like a shift in leadership style from like kind of, especially particularly in architecture, where we have like a hero architect kind of archetype that, you know, at least our universities are trying to sell us as like the desirable thing for us to want to have. But then like the very real need in architecture for us to act collaboratively. And we see that when we're working with our consultants and stuff like that. But also like within our own offices, within our own kind of leadership styles, how much more effective collaboration is than like top-down hierarchical methods of, I just tell you what to do and you just do it. And you should just be able to do what I want from you, you know?
Yeah. Catherine just messaged me and said, "Hey, we're past the hour," which it's a good thing that she did, because otherwise we might still be here 6 o'clock.
Well, that's part of my job, is to let you know what time it is. So
yes, I appreciate that. Okay, thanks,
I don't
Siri.
want to leave without my.
Siri just revealed that you can stay on another hour. No, she said you don't have anything on your calendar till 6 p.m.
Oh,
so she's right. We can just keep talking. Anyway, sorry, Jay. What were you going to say?
So, and I don't want to ruin the end of the book for it. I think Manuel had 3 pages left, and at the end of the book, she says, "Jump into the fray. Choose the great adventure of being brave and afraid at the same time." And I have a tattoo on my back of 2 characters, and they're both holding onto a balloon, and one of them looks scared to death, and one of them is cheering. And that's exactly what it is. Is they're on the adventure, and they're, you know, it's a description for my life. It always has been. And so I was that really hit home when she said that at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Now I really want to see that tattoo now, Jay, but
that might be oversharing. But
that might be.
I don't know if that's disclosure. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. There are the Teddy Roosevelt quote, which I should have had pulled up, but I don't. The people that are not in the fray, however that quote goes, that was one that really struck me. And Wendy shared a comment here, and I think this is totally appropriate for our community here. She says, one quote I wrote down: "True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are." And I think that's a fantastic takeaway as well. And again, I think that's a great application for our community, right? There's no ask in Context and Clarity and Entree Architect for anyone to conform, to an archetype or anything else, to use Caitlin's word from a minute ago. We just want you to show up, right? Show up who you are and bring your experiences and concerns and all of those things and add to the conversation. And we thank you. We thank you for that. Thank you for being part of this community. It's the reason that we get to have Context and Clarity Live every Thursday afternoon. It's the reason that we get to have the book club now, the last Friday of every month. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. And I guess before we wrap it up, Catherine's about to jump out of her chair.
That was me reminding you to tell us what the book is called.
This is me leaning in.
I have waited as long as I could possibly wait.
I waited 6 minutes longer than I thought I could possibly wait.
I know. I've been waiting for this to boil over. So thank you for discussing Dare to Lead by Breneé Brown and reading it. For those of you that have read it, if you haven't read it, please read it. I think it is something that you can really benefit from. The book for the Context and Clarity Book Club for April, right? For April, which we will discuss on
my gosh.
Friday, April 29th. So you actually have 5 weeks to read this. It should not take you nearly that long.
And now we go to a commercial break.
We'll
To be
right back.
continued.
All right.
That's the cliffhanger. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective
I remember now.
She brings him up in the book too. I think it's a good natural shift.
Yep. She does. So, of course, we'll publish posts about this, but you have 5 weeks
And
now
7
to
habits.
read.
So that's like
And
1.4 habits a week to read about.
Okay.
Right? Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It will be our April Context and Clarity book club book.
Oh, I can't believe how we're getting through this year so fast. We're already talking about the end of April.
Yeah, it's
2022 is my year though, so I better hurry up.
There you go. So
that's awesome.
Let me bring Michelle. She's popped back. Let me bring her back. Thanks everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks for being a part of this. Caitlin, thank you for joining us here on screen.
Thanks.
Jay, thank you for joining us here on screen. Michelle, thank you for joining us here on screen. Catherine, thank you for showing up, even though you didn't get an invite.
I'll always be here.
Thank you.
I'll always show up.
Thank you for that. Thanks, everybody. Really do appreciate all of you for this opportunity to do this. Of course, we'll be back Monday. Our guest for Context and Clarity Live will be Shajay Bhujan, who is an associate director at Zaha Hadid Architects and a co-founder and head of computation and design at ZHA Code. He speaks extensively on blockchain opportunities for architects. So we're going back to the high-tech world, but I think you're going to want to join us for this conversation on Thursday, March 31st with Shajay Bhujan. Of course, I will post about this tomorrow morning, give you a little bit of background, and ask you, what do you want to talk about next week? So make sure you look for that post, respond to that, comment on that post as we craft next week of Context and Clarity conversations. But until then, everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. Find a little bit of time to breathe and relax and find a way to get rejuvenated, because we're going to do this all again next week. Please take care of yourself. Be well. Stay safe. Keep those around you safe and well. And hope you do have a great weekend. Ed says, go Cyclones. Iowa State must be playing either now or later tonight. So watch a little basketball if that's your thing. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope I'll see you somewhere sometime soon.